do our weekly coffee talk. And my name is Seeger-Wenske. I'm a speaking coach, and each week I'm inviting inspirational people who are on a mission to make this world a better place and who have something to say that is of value for all of us. And I am especially excited about this week's coffee talk because we're going to talk to Dierdre. Am I pronouncing your name right? I'm German, so I sometimes go, am I slaughtering someone's name?
Yeah, I think everyone in Ireland, anyone with an Irish name anyway, we have this problem, It's not about putting pronouns. It's just not working out what the pronoun is. It's just working out what the pronunciation is.
There's something like, I'm like, Dierdre. So whenever I slaughter it, just let me know. When I was a student in the States, I'm like, my name got slaughtered a lot. I mean, that's been almost 30 years ago. But the biggest slaughter was Rita Wonker. And I thought, how do you go from Britta to Rita? And Wenske Wonker, I have no idea. So I know what it feels like. Anyway, so today's topic is very dear to my heart because, full disclosure, I don't understand a whole lot about it. So Dierdre has been so kind to say that she's going to let us in on how our brains work and how we can use our brains to be more productive, more effective, and in a way more happy. So how can our brains work for us instead of working against us? And again, I've read all the books like 4 Weeks to Know You, and I've meditated, but I still don't fully understand what our brains can do for us. So Dierdre, tell us about who are you? How did you come to be fascinated with the brain? And then let us in on all the good stuff.
Yeah, thanks, Britta. So who am I? That's a great question, which reminds me very much of my favorite childhood book, which was Alice in Wonderland.
Ooh, yeah.
Anyone who's read that will remember the caterpillar sitting on the mushroom, who, when Alice asked him what she should do or where she should go, and she said she didn't even know who she was, he was like, well, who are you? This is one of the fundamental questions really for us. Who are we?
Yeah.
And who do we see ourselves as, which is very, very important as well. In terms of our brains and how they work, this is one of the things that we are still collectively trying to figure out. It is the field of neuroscience, aka brain science, is where people are trying to work out how our brain actually functions and what that means.
Mm-hmm.
Now, of course, we have sort of common functions of the brain that we all have and will recognize, such as like fight or flight, getting us motivated to do things, and surviving as another good common one. But because we all have this layer of individual experience, individual worldview, then it makes it very difficult to pin down a sort of a formula for the brain.
Right.
So we're currently, and always will be probably, trying to discover more about it. This is like an internal version of the entire universe. We're never surprised when people find out more new things about the universe because it's so vast. But we have this vast thing to discover inside our heads as well.
And that's true. I just recently read, a couple of years ago actually, that for a long time we thought at some point the brain development is actually done. So that there's no, it's not going to shift or change anymore. But that's actually not true. I believe, if I can remember correctly, up until the end of our lives, the brain is developing and shifting and is actually capable of learning new things.
Absolutely, yes. This is this wonderful skill, faculty. I'm not entirely sure even what the right word is, but this thing called neuroplasticity, which is the brain's ability to learn, to change, to grow, to adapt, and to rewire itself at any stage of life. Now, obviously, we associate learning and very rapid learning and a lot of learning with the earlier parts of our lives.
Right.
But it's definitely not true that stops. It can keep going. And it's not even just about learning new skills. For instance, if you suffer an injury or something, your brain can actually repurpose parts of itself to pick up the functions that were previously handled by something else.
So what would I need to, because we're talking about how I can use my brain to work for me, not against me. Like my question is, and I'm assuming the people watching or watching the replay, what do I need to understand about my brain so I can in a way work hand in hand with it and not fight it?
That is a great question. Really, really good question. And this is, I think, one of the things that people are sort of searching for and don't quite get. So we have an awful lot of people will focus on their mindset, for instance, which is very, very important. And that the way that we think definitely affects how our brain operates. So for instance, if we feel that things are going very badly and that we kind of get caught in that little loop of things happen, bad things happen to us, then, the likelihood is that we're waiting for that. We're predicting that that's going to happen. Whereas when we know how to raise that expectation and to raise that habit of thinking better, more productive thoughts, then we can work in that space. In terms of the actual physical kind of science, I think that this is really, really important to understand a little bit of. We don't need to get into the nitty gritty of it, but knowing what's happening and what the responses your brain is having with your situation and how that happens, that can actually help us to go, I see what's happening here. I know I can recognize that this is my brain's response to something. So I'll give you an example. I was in the middle of a launch recently, and I was putting out a big email. What do you call those things when you put out lots of emails? Mail shot.
Mailed.
Yeah. So it was like just about to do. I'd everything written. It was all done, and I went to go, push send on my platform, and realized that every single email on that list was gone. There were no emails left. And I had a deadline. It was a self-imposed deadline, but it was still a deadline that I had to meet. So I the response was, my gut started tightening. My heart rate increased. My breath was starting to get shallow. I was starting to not think clearly about this because panic was setting in. That fight or flight was setting in. But because I understood that was what was happening, because I was able to take a step back and say, okay, I can see that this is a situation that is a very normal trigger for a panic response. So let's stop. Let's just take a minute. Let's name these sensations. Let's name what's happening, which is very important. When we can name what's happening, then we can relate to it better. We can understand it. We can detach ourselves from it, It's not that we are the feeling, we are experiencing the feeling.
That makes so much sense. Yeah.
And then the next step would be to pick one thing that I can do right now when we're having that feeling. So that helps us to create an action which then can create some clarity. It's not that we're stuck in this loop of overwhelm.
So in a way, I'm just going to keep asking because this is so fascinating. And by the way, if you're watching, please comment. We're going to keep this interactive. Comment, tell us your thoughts. This little link, if you press that link, then we can see your name. If you don't want that, then don't worry about this. But please talk to us. So in a way, what you're saying is I should detach myself from, in a way, move into an observer's perspective. When that happens,
that helps to get a little bit of space from it, because we're not the emotion. The emotion is a transient thing; it will pass. But when we sort of get almost blinkered by it, then it becomes very hard to get out of that. And that there's a scientist called Lisa Feldman Barrett, and she's doing an awful lot of work on how our brains create emotions. People have for many, many years believed that emotions were just things that happened to us and we didn't have control over them. But the work that this scientist is doing is proposing that in actual fact, our brains are creating those emotions, not even just as a response to something, but actually as a prediction to something, as a way of surviving something.
So there's a conditioning.
Yes.
So, for example, this is from my own life. So, when I was as a kid, when I was late or when I was slow, my parents would be like, "Hurry up, hurry up, hurry up." Now, when my kids are slow, I can feel just, even though nothing bad is happening, but I have this physical response, and I have to consciously go, "Britta, breathe. Nothing bad is happening. You're not 3 anymore, and you're not getting, spanked for being late. This didn't happen, but that's the
Yeah.
That's the conditioning in a way.
Absolutely. Because if we go back to neuroplasticity for a minute, your brain will not distinguish between things that are positive to learn and things that are negative to learn. So it will learn, it will just learn.
Yeah.
So, and we learn by repetition. So you have had repetitions of this, feeling the sensation. But let's think of it a slightly different way. You have also survived. You are still here.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You're still alive. So as far as your brain's concerned, it's done a good job.
That's a good way, because but I mean, this would be a totally different topic in terms of like the victimhood that people sometimes move into. You're like, you're still here, so yeah.
So when we get to that stage, it's like, right, well, what's our motivation to change then? And this takes us to a little bit of why people find it so difficult to create new habits sometimes. It's because the old one, it hasn't killed you, basically. I mean, that's a very simplistic way of looking at it. But, unless you can create a value that really appeals to part of your brain, the unconscious part of your brain, not necessarily the willpower part of your brain, because willpower is a finite resource. And it's very hard to do things on just willpower alone.
It is,
motivated at a deeper level.
Absolutely. So what happens in the brain? Like why? So this is what I know, and I might be completely wrong. So there's like all these like neurons firing, and they create some sort of pathway in the brain. And the more I do is one thing, like the more this pathway is being used. So from what you're saying is changing is so difficult because that pathway, that new one isn't, and you can hear I'm just kind of going, is it right or not? That new pathway isn't there yet.
Exactly. Okay. And that's where practice and repetition come in. Okay. So if you think of it like this, you might have heard of the kind of the 4 levels of competence. So at the bottom level, you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
And then you know what you don't know.
Right.
And then you know what you know, and then you forget about you don't know what. So I like to think about this as a really practical example in terms of when you learn to drive.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yes.
If you remember that sensation of driving or riding a bike or something like that, the first few times that you got behind the wheel of the car, it was like, why not the ride?
Because I'll never be able to do that. Like people shift and look and drive and don't kill anyone. That's not possible.
And now you can probably go 100 miles and not even actually notice doing any of those things.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
So that's a great example of how our brains adapt to that thing and to that learning. But of course, if we want to undo that, if we want to change that, then we can build a new habit.
Mm-hmm.
But that old one's still going to be there for quite a long time. And that's why people fall off the wagon. That's why they, succeed to a certain extent with a new habit, like going to the gym or eating better or whatever it is, getting up early. But then the old habit just kind of, it's still there a little bit, and the mind just slips into that groove and wants to do that thing again. So again, that's why the motivation part and the values, how it relates to our values, can really, really help.
Is it that the brain wants to, in a way, preserve itself when it keeps pushing me into that old pathway? Is it like
it's not so much about preserving itself, although issues of identity can definitely come into
absolutely. Yes.
It's actually more about energy. Your brain is really energy hungry. And it uses quite a lot of our entire body budget, and it's very glucose hungry, for instance. Okay. And it takes energy to rewire these neural pathways.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that changes things, doesn't it?
I'm trying to understand that. So it means so it takes energy to change.
Yeah.
So what happens in the brain when I try to? Does it like go? This is so basic. Feed me. So like how?
So if you think about it in terms of what makes it easier to survive.
Yes.
Does using energy make it easier to survive, or does conserving energy make it easier to survive?
Yeah, well, conserving.
So, if we can stay alive and not use energy, which is kind of where not changing is, then our brain will default to that.
Makes sense.
Does, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
makes so much sense. What I read recently, and I think it was in the book Atomic Habits, he said, and I'm curious what you have to say, he said, so when you're trying to change, in a way, what you said, your brain will tell you not to change. But once you name what you're trying to change, or you name the old habit. So, for example, I want to eat healthier, but my default setting is I'm just going to reach for the chocolate. So the moment I'm reaching for the chocolate, he said, just say I am reaching for the chocolate, and just naming it will make your brain go, whoa, is this really who I want to be, or is this really what I want to do? Is that true, or is it too simple?
There's a couple of things, right? Your brain has a system of like threats and rewards, okay? And we have kind of, say the bar of chocolate, right? You will get a reward. Your brain like it has a little dopamine thing from getting that chocolate that you enjoy, yeah?
Absolutely.
So there's another kind of strategy, and it's similar, I guess. It's what he's doing when he's asking you, I think anyway, to say, I am reaching for the chocolate, is to actually break that instantaneous gratification of that reward, that dopamine reward thing. Yeah. So, that's just changed there. But what I would also suggest is that what we can do is we can say if we take a pause. So for instance, the bar of chocolate, if you find yourself doing that, I want a bar of chocolate, set a timer for a minute on your phone until you actually go for it. Increase the length of time between that desire for that dopamine and that actual gratification of the dopamine.
Yes, and someone said that chocolate surely is good for the brain. It is, I think, because it gives that energy in that moment, right? And also, I think we're wired to just get the reward. And what did I read?
Rewards are great, and threats are not.
It gives you this instant reward, whereas if you eat an apple, it just doesn't. It's not sweet. There's not lots of sugar, so you don't feel like this is really a good reward. So, what else could I do, like on a daily basis, to really use my brain to work with me? Like, do you have some? I don't like the word quick tips because I don't really believe in quick tips. But is there anything where someone goes, "Oh, I can implement that right away"?
There are lots of things actually that we can do, and one of them it is, as I've probably not made very clear, but definitely knowing a little bit more is really, really critical. Because once you start to understand a few of these things, it helps you. You can't really unlearn those things once you know them. So you might forget them in that stage because you're practicing them, but they will help. I'll tell you one little thing that we talk about a lot, which is the Goldilocks curve. And have I mentioned this to you before?
No, you haven't, but somewhere in the back of my mind, I think I've heard of it, but tell me more.
So the Goldilocks curve is because, we have two forms of stress in our brain. Stress in itself is not a bad thing, right?
Right.
So we have stress is what helps us to get things done. If we had no stress, we wouldn't do anything.
Yes.
So stress in its positive form is called eustress. And then we have stress in an overstimulated form, which we associate with, not feeling great. So the Goldilocks curve is actually what scientists call that there's a curve where we have too little stress on one side and too much stress on the other. Yeah. And at the top of that curve, where everything is just right, like Goldilocks in the story, that's where we want to try and be. So knowing about the Goldilocks curve and knowing what for us is the sweet spot in our own curve can really, really help, because not everybody has the same tolerance for stress or tolerance for lack of stimulation. And this, we've talked in other groups about, people who like doing hard things.
I know,
so the kind of type A personalities, and they definitely need a lot of stimulation, a lot of activity, a lot of stress. And for them, if they don't get that, it just feels all wrong. Whereas somebody for whom a cup of cocoa and a good book is enough stimulation will feel very overwhelmed in a type A personality kind of world.
Right.
So again,
sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, it's just down to, know thyself. This, this is pretty ancient advice, but we do have to observe what happens and start noticing on a day-to-day basis. Okay, I had X amount of pressure. You can grade it on a scale of 1 to 10 for yourself or something like that today. And that made me feel good. That made me feel bad. That made, how did that make you feel? And notice how that comes in to each day as it plays out. The thing about the over and under stimulation on our Goldilocks curves is interesting though, because it actually it produces somewhat the same effects, whether it's too much or too little of it you're getting. So I know it's really weird, isn't it?
You can see
I know, it's like, what?
I have no poker face. I could never play poker. I'd be like, oh God. So what happens is when we've got too much or too little, we tend to have some of the same effects, which could be black and white thinking, foggy thinking, poor memory, poor decision making, lack of impulse control. So when let's kind of you come back from a day where your Goldilocks curve has been trampled all over, and you come in and you have been planning to eat well. You have been doing very well, eating well. And you come back and you think, oh my gosh, I just can't anymore. Bag of Doritos. And there goes your good intentions. Oh, that is interesting. I'm just trying to relate that back to my life. And I have 2 kids, and I run 2 companies, and I can so relate to that example, because I do well with my eating, and I get home and I'm all probably like really over the top, and I go, just give me something.
Yeah.
And then I eat it and I go, why did I just eat, that chocolate bar? I don't even like it.
Yeah.
And it makes sense of what you say. Yeah.
Yeah. And for some people, it's not even about, the kind of the dopamine. It might just be something stupid, like it's just there, but your brain needs the energy as well. So all of these things then start to play into a bigger picture of how we can help our brain to be more effective and therefore help ourselves. So knowing the kind of things that our brains need in terms of nutrition, in terms of water, in terms of rest and exercise and sleep. Sleep's another massive one for our brains, because if we don't get enough sleep, our brains can't clean themselves. They actually clean themselves when we're asleep.
You know what? I always say I don't mind tired. But where I can function is exhaustion. Where I'm so tired, I can't even keep my eyes open. And I know some people they have no problem with that, and I can't deal with that. So is it just so that I really understood correctly? So are you saying even when I'm understimulated, those are the same patterns, like poor decision making? That as well is so true, because when I feel, I don't want to say bored, because I hardly ever feel bored, but when something happens, I feel like I'm walking through glue, and I feel sluggish in a way.
Yeah.
But that makes so much sense.
Yeah, and it might not even be that you're bored. You might be very overworked and still understimulated.
Yeah.
So, for instance, if you are in a job where you don't feel like you are reaching your potential, you could be both over and understimulated in a way, because your intellect isn't getting that run in the park that it needs to actually make you feel good and fulfill that idea or that need that we have, I think, to reach what we're capable of.
Makes so much sense. I always say motherhood is this really strange mixture between you're exhausted, you're completely bored. Playing have a pig for the 10th time on the playground. I'm like, I have 2 university degrees. I'm bored out of my mind. I just can't handle this. At the same time, I'm so tired.
And we could go down we could talk for another hour on this topic, I think, Britta, because it is so important. Because, there are so many kind of societal kind of boxes that we put ourselves in. I must be the best mom. That means being with my kids all the time. But in actual fact, to be that best mom, we need that stimulation. We need to be fulfilled ourselves as people.
Yes.
We're not just childcare units.
And it's so true. It's seeing the person behind all the roles.
Yes. Yeah. This is, again, we're going down a slightly different road again on the brain thing here, because, you know, we have two hemispheres, the left and the right hemisphere, and they see things very differently.
Yes.
It's not, you know, it used to be the case that people thought that, or said that we were left hemisphere or left-brained or right-brained.
I remember that. I grew up that way. Yes.
No, that's not the way it is. We both use both hemispheres all the time. But they have very different ways of seeing things. So the right hemisphere is very big picture. The best metaphor I've come across for this is the right hemisphere is looking at the whole forest, and the left hemisphere is looking at one pine cone.
Yeah.
So it's about big picture and it's about detail. So we need both of those things in all aspects of our lives, really, to be able to keep going. But you know, that if we're over calibrated to one or other sides of that, then we tend to get a very this or that sort of mindset about things. When in actual fact, we're more than often than not both. We're this and that.
How would I find out? I mean, I'm sure, again, it comes back to know yourself. But like for me, I like you just describing that, I know I'm right hemisphere. Like, absolutely. How would I strengthen the other side? And I'm assuming this is also interesting, you know, for those watching or watching the replay. How do we strengthen?
Yeah, well, there are a couple of, I mean, we do a lot of exercises that are designed to explore both of the hemispheres and to understand the assets and gifts that both of them have, because people do tend to have a preference, you know, oh, I'm very creative and I'm very free thinking and I'm very detail oriented and I get things done. So again, we tend to think of ourselves as this or that, but in actual fact, we're both. And when we have both of those aspects of the brain, and there are a lot of other different aspects in the brain as well, but when we get them all working together, then we have a more integrated state. And this integration is what allows us to actually tap into the gifts and assets of all the aspects as we require them.
Yeah, that makes sense.
One of the other things actually, and for anybody who's listening and watching who meditates, mindfulness exercises they've been proven to actually help with the integration. So, you know, there's a piece in the middle between the two called the corpus callosum, and it joins them, and that actually grows with more meditation and mindfulness practices.
Isn't that interesting?
Isn't it?
I'm just going, isn't that interesting? Because I personally have such a hard time meditating, and I don't know why that is. I'd rather go for a run or work out, go for a swim, but sitting down, actually just closing my eyes and breathing, I'm not there yet. You know, even though I know it's beneficial.
But there are many ways to do it. There are many ways to meditate. And I think that, you know, we do have this sort of not necessarily accurate notion that it has to be kind of sitting still and all the rest. We can be mindful whilst we're walking, for instance. And I mean, what I know of you, Britta, you're a very energetic person. You definitely like to sort of keep active and keep on the move.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I find it very difficult to sit and meditate.
Yeah.
But what I will do, and what I have done, various things, I practice kendo, which you have to focus on. The Japanese arts, by the way, are great. If you take up origami, you have to focus on what you're doing.
So true.
If you do something like enso painting, you know, Japanese circle, you've got to focus. Everything there is about focusing the mind and the body into one action. And that's a good way to think about it. It doesn't have to be just sitting still.
It's when someone just said has been taking 2 entire years to become more mindful. There's hope. There's hope. And it's true, like you said, there are so many ways, especially the Japanese way. It's just, I'm just thinking of making tea, and you know, apparently the tea ceremony is.
Oh, they can turn anything into an art, can't they?
Probably, yes. And it's funny. We said origami. Like my daughter, she's 5. She's turning 5, and she always says when I go to the office, "Are you gonna just build something for me, like a little box or a little heart?" So I sit in the office and I just kind of do these things, and it's actually beautiful. But there as well. It's I can. Part of me goes, can I just be done with this, as opposed to doing all these little things.
Well, that's part of it, isn't it? It's actually getting to be in the here and now, and this brings us to another part. There are a couple of networks in the brain. One is called the task positive network, and the other is called the default mode network. So in the task positive network, that's where we're here and now. And in the default mode network, we're sort of moving like back and forward, thinking about the future, thinking about the past, and so on. Yeah.
Yeah. It's and it's interesting how much my brain keeps propelling me into the future or things about what happened. And I think I know I'm not the only one who all struggle with that, but and that's what I love about having kids. And I've learned this was a process to just go, okay, I'm done in the office, I'm going home now, and I'm just going to be with my kids.
Yeah.
And and I just follow in a way their lead. And it's beautiful. It's really beautiful. So, oh my God, I could talk for hours. This is beautiful. So we're going to do something that I actually never do on these coffee talks, which is the one rule is we never sell anything. But this is different because it's always good. We can always break our own rules, when there's a reason or a value behind that. So it becomes an ethic more than a rule. So you created an amazing course, and it's a $97 course on how we can actually use the brain to work for us, not against us. But there's also something really beautiful that you do. And I want you to tell us about this, because I can so relate, because I'm all about helping people and, just supporting each other. So tell us about what are you going to do when someone purchases the course?
Oh, thank you, Britta. So first of all, if you don't mind, I just want to mention why I want to do this.
Absolutely.
Over the last while, I've seen a lot of people who are struggling, and when I look at why they're struggling, it's because they don't have access to this information, to these tools and so on. And I know that there are an awful lot of charities and volunteers and so on out there who are working with people who are vulnerable in many ways and who would benefit from knowing some of the stuff and some of the techniques and tools that we kind of just touched on there. So with the 4-week program, what I decided to do was to, for every spot that's sold on it, I'm actually giving one to a volunteer or a community worker, somebody who's working with maybe like a men's shed or a youth club or something like that, where people can actually really start on this journey of knowing themselves, knowing their what their brains need from them, and that they're not wrong or broken, or it's not just them. It's this idea that the more we know about this and the more we talk about it, the more people will understand that their brains are normal human brains, having normal responses to things that are either overtaxing or undertaxing or just plain exceptional. But in actual fact, it is not necessarily something that is wrong. It's just something they need more information about.
Yes, and it's beautiful that you want to give that to people who can then teach it to other people. Yeah. So if I purchased a course, could I then maybe suggest someone who needs it, or are you finding those people? Yeah. What's the procedure?
Absolutely. You can, by all means, I would love for people, even if it's not something that you want to do, even if you don't want to do the course, I would love you to make it known to people who are working with groups like this that we are doing this. And it is just, it is a basic introduction to some of these concepts, but there are some very useful tools to get people thinking and get them started on it as well. So absolutely nominate people. I would love to see that happen. And if you don't have someone to nominate, I have a long list of people who have self-nominated as well.
That's beautiful. And I don't know if you know, but one of my favorite quotes is, "We're all here to take each other home." And I do some work where I just, I don't try to do my pro bono work. And I have a friend in Romania who's very poor, and we send money and we send, baby clothes and stuff, because I do believe with privilege comes a certain responsibility to help each other. And again, no one needs to do, but that's one of my deepest values and beliefs. So that's why I really so love the idea of you, giving some courses away for each purchase course. So what we're going to do is we're going to put a link in the comments, and then people can sign up and then get in touch with you. Excuse me. get in touch with you, nominate someone, or you go and give that to someone.
That's
fantastic. Is there any? Yeah, you wanted to say something, so I keep talking, and I'm like,
no, it's fine. What I was just going to say is that the first module is available already, but what I have decided to do, because there have been people coming and saying, oh, is it started? Have you started? I can't start this week. Can I start next week? What I'm actually going to do is every week there's a module of video lessons, and there's a live question or like a discussion session, and then that was for 4 weeks, but obviously I'm going to extend the live sessions for a couple of extra weeks on the end of it as well, so that if anybody is joining a little bit later, it's okay. We got you.
Perfect, wonderful. That was amazing. I learned so much, and I'm gonna definitely purchase the course. I already have someone in mind who can use that. So thank you for your time. Thank you for your wisdom. And everyone who's watching the replay, keep the conversation going, ask us questions. We're here to help. And I mean, we're here because now I'm the expert. You are here, Dierdre. You're going to answer all the questions.
Yeah, but like if anybody wants to chat more about it, get in touch.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to say. Blah. See, my brain.
Overstimulated or understimulated?
Well, I don't know. I have 2 sick kids at home, and I don't know.
Bit of both.
So again, thank you so much for your time, and we'll keep the conversation open. Thank you everyone who was watching. Let us know what you thought, and we will speak next week for the next coffee talk. Sending love to all of you, and stay healthy. Bye.